"You're holding it wrong," became Lyra's strength as she defeated Vorik in the challenge circle, using fluid movements instead of rigid forms. When confronted by Sulva and Commander Kresh on the plateau, she made the ultimate choice, throwing her cherished blade to save Marcus before using the matriarch's own momentum to send her plummeting to her death below. The unforgiving sun of Iridia cast long shadows across the canyon walls, painting them in shades of blood and rust. Captain Lyra Tamar moved like a wraith through the winding passages, her crimson cloak billowing behind her. The star-iron blade at her hip hummed with quiet anticipation. A family heirloom passed through generations of Vermilion clan hunters. For 3 days, she had tracked the human mercenary across the most treacherous terrain on the frontier world, Marcus Hale. The name itself was an insult to her people, a foreigner who had violated sacred hunting grounds, taken what wasn't his to take, and worse, escaped the Vermilion's justice. Until now. Lyra's boots crunched softly on the loose gravel as she approached the canyon's apex. The wind howled through the stone corridors, carrying dust that stung her amber eyes. She adjusted her breathing apparatus and crouched low behind a jutting rock formation. There he was, just as her scouts had reported, a lone figure silhouetted against the dying light, seemingly admiring the view from the precipice. She studied him with narrowed eyes, tall for a human, with shoulders broadened by years of combat. His brown hair was tied back, revealing a face weathered by Iridia's harsh climate. A collection of scars marked exposed skin, trophies from battles survived. He wore no clan colors, only practical survival gear in muted tones that blended with the canyon stone. Lyra had been training for this moment since she was a child. Every form practiced 10,000 times. Every stance perfected under the unrelenting eye of the matriarch herself. She was the finest blade wielder the Vermilion clan had produced in 3 generations, her technique flawless, her discipline absolute. With practiced silence, she drew the star-iron blade. The metal caught the light of Iridia's setting sun, momentarily gleaming like captured fire. In one fluid motion, she vaulted the rock barrier and closed the distance between them. She expected surprise, fear perhaps, the typical reaction of prey when cornered. Instead, Marcus Hale turned slowly, as though he had been waiting for her all along. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Captain Tamar," he said, pronouncing her name with unusual accuracy for an off-worlder. "I was beginning to think you'd never find me." Lyra's blade flashed forward, stopping mere centimeters from his throat. Her stance was textbook perfect. Left foot forward, right foot braced, shoulders aligned with hips, center of gravity low. "Kneel!" she commanded. To her surprise, he complied without resistance, dropping to one knee on the dusty ground. Blood trickled from a fresh cut on his cheek, where her blade had nicked him during the motion. "Marcus Hale," she pronounced formally. "You stand accused of trespassing on Vermilion hunting grounds, theft of clan artifacts, and evasion of justice. The penalty is death." She pressed the blade against his skin until a thin line of crimson appeared. "Any last words?" The human's eyes, a strange, pale blue that reminded Lyra of the sky after a dust storm, met hers without flinching. His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too white against his sun-darkened face. "Yeah," he said with infuriating calm. "You're holding it wrong." The words struck Lyra like a physical blow, before she could process their meaning. Marcus shifted his weight subtly. His shoulder brushed against her wrist, altering the angle of her grip by mere millimeters. It shouldn't have mattered. Her training was perfect, her stance impeccable. And yet, inexplicably, the star-iron blade slipped from her fingers as though it had developed a will of its own. It clattered against the stone, the sound echoing through the canyon like mocking laughter. In the heartbeat it took Lyra to recover from her shock. Marcus was already standing, dusting off his knee. He hadn't even bothered to retrieve her weapon. The blade is an extension of yourself, he said, gesturing toward the fallen sword. Not just your arm, but your intent. Your clan teaches the forms, but not the feeling. He shook his head. A shame, really. That's beautiful craftsmanship. Humiliation burned through Lyra like acid. She lunged for the blade, but Marcus was already backing away toward a narrow path that wound down the canyon wall. I didn't take anything that wasn't freely given, he called over his shoulder. Ask your matriarch about the northern ruins and what sleeps there. Ask her why off-worlders are suddenly so interesting to the Bone Reapers. Then he was gone, descending the path with the ease of someone who had traversed it many times before. Lyra stood frozen, the recovered blade heavy in her hand, her perfect technique suddenly feeling hollow as the wind howled around her. The Vermilion clan stronghold rose from the canyon floor, like a termite mound fashioned by giants, a spire of red stone and metal, reinforced over generations against the sandstorms and raiders that plagued Iridia's frontier. Under normal circumstances, returning to its shelter would have filled Lyra with pride. Today, she approached with dread pooling in her stomach. The guard towers tracked her approach, recognition signals flashing green as her clan markings were verified. The massive entry doors, salvaged from an ancient starship and reinforced with local metals, groaned open just enough to admit her. Inside, the familiar scent of spiced incense and weapon oil greeted her. Clan members paused in their daily tasks to watch her pass, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. News traveled fast in the stronghold. They already knew of her failure. The grand hall loomed at the center of the structure, illuminated by shafts of filtered sunlight streaming through strategically placed apertures in the ceiling. There, upon a throne carved from the fossilized remains of a sandworm, sat matriarch Sulva. Even in her 8th decade, Sulva commanded respect. Her face, a map of deep lines and ritual scarification, betrayed nothing as Lyra approached and knelt. The matriarch's blade, twin to Lyra's own, but adorned with the gemstones of vanquished enemies, rested across her knees. Rise, Captain Tamar. Sulva's voice rasped, decades of shouting commands through desert storms having left their mark. And explain to me why the human mercenary's head is not decorating our walls. Lyra stood, her shoulders squared despite the shame threatening to collapse her posture. Matriarch, I tracked the human as ordered. I confronted him at the canyon's apex. But he employed some trick. The blade, Sulva interrupted, has served our hunters for 16 generations without failing. Are you suggesting that star iron, forged in the heart of a fallen star, betrayed you? The hall had grown silent. All activity ceased as clan members gathered to witness Lyra's disgrace. Among them stood her childhood rival, Vorik, his scarred face split in a barely concealed smile. No, matriarch, Lyra replied, forcing strength into her voice. The human claimed I was holding it incorrectly. He said something about form versus feeling. And then, Sulva's laughter cut through the hall like a whip crack. Form versus feeling? You would repeat the words of an off-worlder who mocks our traditions? You, who have trained in our ways since you could walk. The matriarch rose from her throne, descending the steps with surprising agility. She circled Lyra like a predator. And what of his claims about the northern ruins? Lyra asked, immediately regretting the question as Sulva's eyes narrowed. So the human poisoned your ears with lies as well as humiliating you? The matriarch hissed. The northern ruins are forbidden for good reason. They are cursed places, where the old ones left their mark before departing our world. She stopped directly before Lyra, close enough that the younger woman could see the calculation behind her eyes. Perhaps your failure is a blessing in disguise, Sulva mused. It reveals a weakness in our ranks before it could cost us more dearly. The matriarch raised her voice to address the gathered clan. Captain Lyra Tamar, heir to the secondary blade of the Vermilion clan, is hereby stripped of her rank and exiled from our stronghold." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. Exile was rarely declared. It was tantamount to a death sentence on Iridia's unforgiving surface. "Matriarch," Lyra protested, "I have served faithfully." "Silence," Sulva's voice echoed from the stone walls. "You may reclaim your honor and your place among us by bringing me the head of the human called Marcus Hale. Until then, you are clanless." With a gesture, Sulva summoned 2 guards. "You may take your blade and 3 days' rations. Nothing more. The desert will test your worth. Captain, return victorious, or not at all." As the guards escorted her from the hall, Lyra caught sight of Vorik's triumphant expression. Next to him stood 3 elders of the council, their faces troubled as they watched her go. Something was wrong in the Vermilion clan, something beyond her own disgrace, but she had no time to unravel it now. Within the hour, Lyra stood outside the massive doors as they sealed shut behind her with ominous finality. The unfiltered sun beat down mercilessly, and the hot wind carried grit that stung her exposed skin. Her supplies, water, dried meat, a basic medical kit, and her star iron blade weighed little, both a blessing and a curse. She would move quickly, but survival beyond 3 days would depend entirely on her skills. She turned toward the canyon's distant apex where she had last seen Marcus Hale. If she was to reclaim her honor and uncover the truth behind his cryptic warnings, she would need to find him again. This time, not as an executioner, but as a supplicant. The thought burned worse than Iridia's twin sons. 3 days in the outer canyons had taught Lyra more about survival than a lifetime in the clan stronghold. Her water was nearly gone, despite careful rationing. The protein bars, tasteless emergency rations, had run out that morning. Her skin, despite the protection of her cloak, had reddened and begun to peel around her eyes and mouth, where the breathing apparatus couldn't fully shield her. She had tracked Marcus to an ancient outpost, one of many ruins scattered across Iridia. Remnants of the old ones, or perhaps early colonists, whose names had been lost to time. This particular structure was half buried in sand, its curved architecture suggesting it had once been part of a larger complex. As she approached, the sense of being watched prickled along her spine. She dropped into a crouch, scanning the undulating dunes and rock formations that surrounded the outpost. Nothing moved except sand carried by the constant wind. "You're getting better," a voice called from behind her. 3 days ago, I could have walked right up and taken that pretty blade while you were still scanning the horizon." Lyra whirled, unsheathing her weapon in one fluid motion. Marcus Hale sat atop a partially collapsed wall, legs dangling casually, a container of water in one hand. He looked frustratingly comfortable in the blistering heat. "Come to finish our business, Captain?" he asked, taking a deliberate sip from his container. The sight of water made Lyra's throat constrict painfully. "I am no longer a captain," she replied, keeping her blade leveled at him despite the tremor in her arms, a combination of dehydration and exhaustion. "The matriarch has exiled me until I return with your head." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Yet here you are, talking instead of swinging. Interesting development." "You said I was holding it wrong," Lyra pressed. "You made me look like a fool." "I stated a fact," he corrected. "One that saved your life. By the way, if you'd killed me, you'd never learn why Sulva is so eager to eliminate anyone asking questions about the northern ruins." He tossed the water container toward her. Lyra caught it reflexively with her free hand, suspicion warring with desperate thirst. "It's not poisoned," Marcus said with a roll of his eyes. "If I wanted you dead, I'd just wait another day. Dehydration would finish the job." Lyra hesitated only a moment before lowering her blade and drinking deeply. The water was cool, filtered, not the metallic-tasting recycled liquid from the clan reservoirs. "Why help me?" she asked when she had drunk her fill. Marcus jumped down from his perch, landing with practiced grace. Because Sulva sent her best hunter to kill me, which means she's afraid. And because that hunter is now asking questions instead of following orders blindly. That makes you useful. I followed my orders perfectly, Lyra snapped. You cheated somehow. The blade did exactly what it was supposed to do, Marcus interrupted. It's not just a weapon. It's a tool that responds to intention and awareness. Your clan's fighting style is all memorized positions and rigid forms, effective against predictable opponents, useless against someone who understands flow. Flow, Lyra repeated skeptically. Marcus gestured toward the outpost entrance. Come inside before you burn to a crisp, and maybe I'll explain, assuming you're not still planning to separate my head from my shoulders. Lyra weighed her options. Return to the clan with his head and regain her position, assuming she could defeat him in her weakened state, or follow this irritating human into the ruins and discover what secrets the matriarch was keeping. I reserve the right to kill you later, she said finally. Marcus grinned. Fair enough. The interior of the outpost was surprisingly cool, its ancient walls insulated against Iridia's extreme temperatures. Artifacts of a forgotten civilization filled the chambers, strange metal constructs whose purpose Lyra couldn't begin to guess. Glass-like surfaces with faded markings, and hanging fabrics that hadn't deteriorated despite centuries of neglect. Marcus had clearly been using the place as a base for some time. A sleeping roll occupied one corner, alongside crates of supplies and several containers of water. Maps and diagrams were spread across a makeshift table, fashioned from salvaged materials. Make yourself comfortable, he said, gesturing toward a cushioned chair that must have been salvaged from a merchant vessel. You look like you're about to collapse. I'm fine, Lyra insisted, but her legs betrayed her, buckling as a wave of dizziness struck. She caught herself against a wall, pride stinging worse than her sun-blistered skin. Stubbornness isn't strength, Marcus observed, rummaging through a crate. He produced a medical kit far more sophisticated than the basic supplies Lyra carried. It's just another form of weakness, masquerading as virtue. Before she could protest, he pressed a cool patch against her forehead. Immediate relief spread through her overheated body as the medication was absorbed through her skin. I don't need your help, she muttered, but made no move to remove the patch. Evidence suggests otherwise, Marcus replied dryly. He returned to his maps, giving her space to recover. When you're feeling less likely to pass out, we can discuss why your matriarch has been executing council elders who ask too many questions about the northern sector. That caught Lyra's attention. What are you talking about? The elders guide the clan alongside the matriarch. They aren't executed. Marcus looked up, his expression serious for the first time since she'd met him. 3 elders in the past month. Each one disappeared after questioning Sulva's increased patrols around the ruins. The official story is, they went on meditation retreats into the deep desert. And you know differently because... He reached into a pocket and tossed a small object toward her. Lyra caught it reflexively. A clan signet ring, the kind worn by council elders. This one belonged to Elder Tazral, her mother's closest friend and her own mentor in the finer points of blade work. Where did you get this? She demanded, clutching the ring tightly. From his finger, Marcus said grimly, before I buried what was left of him in the western ravine. Sulva's personal guards did the work, but they're not particularly careful about covering their tracks. They didn't expect anyone to be watching. Lyra's world tilted sideways. Tazral, murdered, by the matriarch's guards? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence lay cold and heavy in her palm. Why? She whispered. Why would Sulva turn against her own council? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Marcus replied, turning back to his maps. It has something to do with what's buried beneath the northern ruins. Something the original settlers found, or brought with them. Something valuable enough to kill for... Lyra's mind reeled. If what Marcus said was true, then her exile wasn't simply punishment for failure. It was elimination of another potential threat. Her questions about the northern ruins had sealed her fate. "Teach me," she said abruptly. Marcus looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Teach you what, exactly?" "Whatever you did that made me drop my blade. The flow you mentioned." Lyra stood, steadier now as the medication worked through her system. "If I'm going to confront Sulva and discover the truth, I need every advantage." "It's not something you can learn in a day," Marcus warned, "or even a month. It requires unlearning as much as learning." "Then we should start immediately," Lyra insisted. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his pale eyes unreadable. Finally, he shook his head. "No." "What do you mean, no?" Lyra demanded. "I mean no," he repeated calmly. "You're not ready. You're still thinking like a clan captain, all rigid purpose and linear goals. Flow doesn't work that way." Frustration surged through Lyra. "Then what would convince you? A duel? A pledge? What?" Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Survival," he said simply. "There's a sandworm nesting ground 2 kilometers east of here. The matriarch laid eggs last cycle. They'll be hatching soon, hundreds of wormlings, each the size of your arm, all hungry and programmed to swarm anything warm-blooded." He pointed to a pack near the door. "In there is a container that emits a pheromone signal that mimics their primary prey. Take it to the nesting grounds, open it, and come back alive. No blade, no conventional weapons. Just you, your wits, and whatever you find along the way." Lyra stared at him in disbelief. "That's suicide?" "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But if you survive, you'll have taken the first step toward understanding what I'm talking about. Form without adaptability is just slow death on Iridia. And if I refuse?" He shrugged. "Then take your blade and go. Try your luck with Sulva. Maybe she'll be feeling merciful." They both knew that wasn't true. The matriarch had sent Lyra into exile expecting her to die. Returning without fulfilling the conditions would only hasten that outcome. With a growl of frustration, Lyra snatched up the pack. "When I return, you will teach me," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "When you return," he agreed, "you'll already have begun to learn." The sandworm nesting ground sprawled across a depression in the desert floor, recognizable by the distinctive spiraling patterns left by the massive creatures as they burrowed beneath the surface. From her position, atop a rocky outcropping, Lyra could see dozens of mounds, each containing clutches of eggs that pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence as the setting sun cast long shadows across the basin. The container in her pack emitted a faint humming noise, barely perceptible but enough to make the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. According to Marcus, once opened, it would release synthetic pheromones that mimicked the scent of a sand lizard, the wormling's preferred prey. "Madness," Lyra muttered to herself, surveying the terrain. No cover except scattered rock formations. No natural weapons except... She paused, noticing a peculiar arrangement of crystalline growths near the basin's edge. Silicate formations, created where lightning had fused the sand during Iridia's violent seasonal storms. An idea began to form. Moving carefully, to avoid creating vibrations that might alert the adult worms patrolling the perimeter, Lyra made her way to the crystal formations. Up close, they resembled jagged glass sculptures, sharp enough to slice through hide or human skin. She broke off several long shards, wrapping their bases in strips torn from her cloak to create makeshift handles. Next, she gathered loose stones of varying sizes, arranging them in a small pile within easy reach. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the canyon walls, the egg mounds began to glow more intensely. The hatching would begin soon. Lyra positioned herself behind a rock formation that offered some protection, while allowing her a clear view of the nearest mound. She removed the container from her pack, studying its simple mechanism. Once activated, she would have perhaps 30 seconds before the pheromones reached the hatching wormlings. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the release button and hurled the container toward the center of the nesting ground. It landed with a soft thud, immediately beginning to emit a pale green vapor that spread rapidly across the sand. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. The nearest mound erupted as dozens of writhing, eel-like creatures burst through the sand surface. Each wormling was approximately the length of Lyra's arm, with needle-sharp teeth and no discernible eyes. They moved by sensing vibrations and chemical signals, making them nearly impossible to evade once they locked onto a target. The swarm surged toward the pheromone source, their pale bodies gleaming in the moonlight. Lyra remained perfectly still, controlling her breathing as Marcus had taught her during their brief time in the outpost. As the creatures converged on the container, she made her move. Grabbing a stone from her pile, she hurled it to the far side of the basin. The sound of its impact sent half the swarm racing in that direction, momentarily confused by the competing stimuli. Lyra seized her opportunity. With a crystal shard in each hand, she darted toward the now vacant egg mound. The adult worms would have created a chamber beneath it, an air pocket where they maintained their nests. If she could reach it before the wormlings realized their mistake. A sharp pain lanced through her calf as one of the creatures sensed her movement and struck. Its teeth sank deep into her flesh, drawing blood that would only attract more of the swarm. Without hesitation, Lyra drove one of her crystal shards through its body, pinning it to the ground. The wound throbbed, but there was no time to address it. More wormlings were changing direction, abandoning the pheromone lure as they detected fresh blood. Lyra sprinted the remaining distance to the mound and began digging frantically, using the crystal shards to cut through the tough outer crust. The sand beneath gave way suddenly, revealing the chamber she had hoped to find. Without hesitation, she dropped into the darkness, landing heavily on the compacted floor 8 feet below. Above her, wormlings swarmed around the opening, their bodies creating a writhing curtain against the night sky. Lyra backed away from the entrance, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The chamber was larger than she had expected, with smooth walls packed and glazed by the adult worm's digestive fluids. And there, in the center, lay what she had gambled everything to find, a clutch of unhatched eggs, each the size of her head, pulsing with bioluminescent light. Working quickly, she gathered several eggs and arranged them near the chamber entrance. Then, using another crystal shard, she punctured one. A viscous fluid leaked out, its scent sharper and more potent than the synthetic pheromones from Marcus's container. The effect on the wormlings was immediate. They went into a feeding frenzy, attacking the leaking egg and, in their blind hunger, each other. Lyra used the distraction to climb back toward the surface, placing punctured eggs at strategic intervals to keep the swarm occupied. By the time she reached the surface, dawn was breaking over the canyon rim. The surviving wormlings had retreated beneath the sand to escape the coming heat, leaving behind a battlefield of severed bodies and shattered eggs. Lyra limped back toward the rocky outcropping, her wounded leg leaving a trail of blood drops that quickly disappeared into the thirsty sand. She had survived, but only by understanding the wormlings' nature and using their own instincts against them. As she crested the ridge that would lead her back to the outpost, she found Marcus waiting, silhouetted against the rising sun. "You adapted," he observed, looking past her to the devastation in the nesting ground. "Used their predatory drive to create confusion, created tools from the environment, exploited the chamber system instead of fighting on the surface." He nodded approvingly. "Not bad for a first lesson." Lyra collapsed onto a flat stone, examining the ragged wound on her calf. "You knew I would be injured," she accused. "I knew you might die," he corrected, kneeling to inspect the bite. From his pocket, he produced a small medical device that he pressed against the wound. It hummed softly as it cleaned and sealed the injury. But I also suspected you had the capacity to see beyond your training. The clan forms don't account for individual creativity or contextual awareness. They're designed to create soldiers, not survivors. And your flow makes better fighters? Lyra challenged, wincing as the device finished its work. Not better fighters, Marcus said, helping her to stand. Better observers, better adapters. The blade goes where it must, not where tradition dictates. He gestured toward the rising sun. Can you walk, or do I need to carry you back to the outpost? Pride stiffened Lyra's spine. I can walk. They made their way slowly across the rocky terrain, the heat already building as Iridia's twin suns climbed higher. By the time they reached the outpost, Lyra's leg had stiffened, and sweat plastered her hair to her forehead. Inside, Marcus directed her to sit while he retrieved water and provisions. As she drank deeply, he spread a diagram across the table before her. The vermilion blade style consists of 12 primary forms, each with 16 variations, he explained, all designed for specific combat scenarios against predictable opponents. But what happens when the opponent, or the environment, doesn't conform to expectations? You adapt the form, Lyra replied automatically. Marcus shook his head. No, you abandon the form entirely. You become formless, like water filling whatever container it encounters. He held up a hand to forestall her protest. I'm not saying the forms are worthless. They build muscle memory, coordination, strength. But they're just the beginning, not the end of mastery. He drew his own weapon, not a clan blade, but something more practical, a short, slightly curved knife with a worn handle that suggested years of use. Tomorrow, we begin your real training, he said. Not with star iron and ritual stances, but with this. He tapped the knife against his palm. A tool that has kept me alive across 12 frontier worlds, because I understand its purpose and limitations. Lyra's hand went instinctively to her clan blade. This has been carried by my family for 16 generations. It's part of our identity, our history. And it nearly got you killed because you were too focused on holding it correctly rather than using it effectively. Marcus countered. He sighed at her stubborn expression. Keep your blade. I'm not asking you to abandon your heritage, only to see beyond its constraints. He stood, returning his knife to its sheath. Rest, heal, tomorrow. I'll show you why Sulva fears what lies beneath the northern ruins, and why she's willing to kill her own people to keep it secret. As Marcus left her to rest, Lyra unsheathed her star iron blade, studying its familiar weight and balance. For the first time, she noticed imperfections in the metal, not flaws, but variations, unique patterns that made the weapon distinct from any other. Like her, it had been forged for a purpose, but perhaps, like her, it could become something more than its makers had intended. Again, Marcus commanded from his perch atop a boulder. And this time, focus on where you're going, not where you are. Sweat stung Lyra's eyes as she navigated the makeshift obstacle course for the 12th time that morning. 3 weeks of Marcus's unorthodox training had transformed her body in subtle ways. Less rigid muscle, more fluid movement, but more significantly, it had begun to transform her mind. The obstacle course consisted of uneven platforms, narrow ledges, and unstable surfaces arranged across a section of canyon floor near the outpost. Marcus had constructed it to mimic urban ruins, natural formations, and starship interiors, environments a frontier mercenary might encounter. Lyra launched herself from a platform, tucking into a roll as she hit the sand below. Without breaking momentum, she flowed into a sprint toward a narrow gap between 2 rock formations. Her clan training would have dictated a specific vault technique. Instead, she assessed the space in real time, adapting her approach to account for a loose stone that hadn't been there during her previous run. As she emerged from the gap, Marcus hurled a projectile toward her, a soft training sphere that would sting but not injure. Instead of dodging or deflecting as she would have done weeks ago, Lyra caught the sphere and in one continuous motion sent it back toward its source, forcing Marcus to duck. "Better," he acknowledged, jumping down from his perch. "You're starting to think in 3 dimensions instead of 2, seeing possibilities instead of obstacles." Lyra accepted the water container he offered, drinking deeply before pouring some over her head. The cool liquid provided momentary relief from Iridia's relentless heat. "When do we move from movement to blade work?" she asked, wiping water from her face. "When you understand that they're the same thing," Marcus replied cryptically. He gestured toward her sheathed weapon. "The blade is just an extension of the movement. If the movement is rigid, the blade becomes predictable. If the movement flows, the blade becomes something else entirely." "You sound like the mystics who live in the deep canyons," Lyra observed. "All riddles and no substance." Marcus laughed. "Maybe I missed my calling." His expression turned serious. "But the riddles have a purpose. They force you to find your own answers instead of memorizing someone else's." He drew his knife and held it loosely in his right hand. "Now, attack me. Use your star iron and everything the clan taught you." Lyra hesitated. "At full speed with real weapons?" "Unless you're afraid," Marcus goaded, his stance casual, almost negligent. Pride flared within her. She drew her blade in a single fluid motion and launched into the most advanced form in the Vermilion repertoire, a combination of strikes designed to overwhelm an opponent's defenses through sheer speed and precision. Marcus didn't attempt to match her technique. Instead, he moved like smoke, always just beyond her blade's reach. His footwork seemingly random, yet perfectly calculated to maintain distance. When he did engage, it was with minimal movement, small deflections that used Lyra's momentum against her, forcing her to constantly readjust her balance. After 2 minutes of increasingly frustrated attacks, Lyra found herself breathing hard, while Marcus appeared hardly affected. Worse, his knife remained untouched. He had defended himself entirely through positioning and timing. "Enough," he said finally. "What did you observe?" "You avoided direct confrontation," Lyra replied between breaths. "Used minimal energy. Exploited openings in my technique." "And why was I able to do that?" She thought for a moment. "Because you weren't bound by expectations of how a fight should proceed. You responded to what was happening, not what you thought should happen." Marcus nodded, a glimmer of approval in his pale eyes. "Exactly. The Vermilion forms are beautiful, powerful, and entirely predictable to someone who understands their underlying patterns. Sulva and her guards rely on intimidation and superior numbers, not superior technique." He sheathed his knife. "Which brings us to our next phase of training. It's time you learned what we're really up against." Back inside the outpost, Marcus uncovered a holographic projector, salvage technology that flickered to life with a static-filled hum. The image it displayed showed a detailed map of the canyon system, with the Vermilion stronghold marked in red and various ruins indicated by blue markers. 3 days ago, a merchant caravan passed through the trading post at Crosswind Junction, Marcus explained, pointing to a location southeast of their position. "One of my contacts was among them. He brought some interesting news." He adjusted the projector's controls, zooming in on the northern sector where the largest concentration of ruins was located. "The Bone Reaper clan has established a perimeter around this entire area. No one in, no one out. They're working with Sulva, or more accurately, she's working for them." Lyra frowned. "The Bone Reapers are our ancient enemies. Why would the matriarch cooperate with them?" "Because they offered her something more valuable than clan pride, technological superiority." Marcus pressed another control, and the hologram shifted to show a strange, angular object partially buried beneath one of the northern ruins. This is what they're excavating, a weapon cache left by the old ones before they abandoned Iridia. How do you know this? Lyra demanded. Because I was hired to find it, Marcus admitted. Not by the Bone Reapers, but by the Planetary Council in the capital. They've been monitoring unusual energy signatures from orbit for months. When the signatures suddenly stopped, they sent me to investigate. He switched off the projector, the blue light fading to leave them in the outpost's dim interior. What I found was a salvage operation run by the Bone Reapers, with Sulva providing local expertise and protection. They've already extracted smaller artifacts, handheld weapons with capabilities far beyond anything currently available on Iridia. But the main prize remains buried, and they're close to uncovering it. What is it? Lyra asked. A planetary defense system, Marcus replied grimly. Or an orbital attack platform, depending on how it's configured. Either way, whoever controls it could dominate not just the canyon territories, but the entire settled region of Iridia. Lyra's mind raced, pieces falling into place. The council elders who disappeared? They must have discovered Sulva's arrangement with the Bone Reapers, and paid with their lives, Marcus confirmed. But there's more. My contact also reported that Sulva has begun executing clan members suspected of disloyalty. Hunters, artisans, even children whose parents questioned her decisions. Horror washed over Lyra. We have to stop this. We? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Last I checked, you were planning to take my head back to the stronghold to regain your position. That was before I knew the truth, Lyra said firmly. My duty is to protect my clan, even from its own leader if necessary. Noble sentiment, Marcus replied. But Sulva has at least 40 guards loyal to her personally. Plus, whatever forces the Bone Reapers have committed. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Then we'll have to be smarter, Lyra insisted. Use what you've taught me about adaptation and flow. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. Now you're thinking like a survivor. He reactivated the projector, zooming out to show the entire canyon system. The first rule of asymmetric warfare: never confront superior forces directly. Instead, disrupt their supply lines, communications, and morale. He pointed to several locations where the canyons narrowed to create natural choke points. The Bone Reapers bring in equipment and provisions through these passages. Small teams could create blockages, rock slides, traps, to slow their progress. What about allies? Lyra asked. The clan may follow Sulva out of fear, but many would stand against her if they knew the truth. Risky, Marcus cautioned. If we're discovered before we're ready, Sulva will execute anyone suspected of sympathy to our cause. Then we start small, Lyra decided. There are hunters in exile like myself, skilled warriors who questioned the matriarch and paid the price. We find them first, build our strength quietly. Marcus studied her with newfound respect. Not bad, Captain. You might have a future in guerrilla tactics if the whole clan warrior thing doesn't work out. I'm not a captain anymore, Lyra reminded him. Maybe not to Sulva, he countered. But leadership isn't about titles. It's about seeing what needs to be done and having the courage to do it. He gestured toward the door. Speaking of which, there's one more lesson before we begin our recruitment drive. Outside, the afternoon heat had given way to the cooler air of early evening. Marcus led Lyra to a flat area behind the outpost where he had cleared away rocks and debris to create a smooth, circular space approximately 10 meters in diameter. The final aspect of flow isn't physical technique or tactical awareness, he explained, taking position at the circle's edge. It's understanding that victory and defeat are artificial constructs. In true conflict, there is only survival and adaptation. He drew his knife, holding it loosely. Attack me again, but this time, forget everything you know about winning. Focus only on continuing. Puzzled but intrigued, Lyra drew her star iron blade and approached cautiously. This time, instead of launching into a formal attack sequence, she moved fluidly, testing Marcus's defenses with exploratory strikes. He responded in kind, his movements economical and precise. Unlike their earlier bout, he now engaged actively, his knife darting toward openings in Lyra's guard, only to withdraw before contact. They circled each other, the dance growing more complex as minutes passed. Lyra found herself responding instinctively to Marcus's movements, reading his intentions through subtle shifts in weight and focus. Clan forms appeared in fragments within her technique, but no longer dictated her approach. When Marcus suddenly accelerated, driving toward her with unexpected speed, Lyra didn't retreat as her training would have dictated. Instead, she stepped into the attack, her blade deflecting his knife while her free hand grasped his wrist. The movement brought them chest to chest, locked in a momentary stalemate. "Good," Marcus said softly, their faces inches apart. "Now, what's your next move?" In the clan forms, you would attempt to disarm me with a specific wrist lock, followed by a killing strike. Lyra knew the technique he described, had practiced it thousands of times. But in this moment, with the desert wind cooling the sweat on her skin and Marcus's pulse beneath her fingers, another possibility presented itself. She released his wrist and stepped back, lowering her blade. Sometimes the next move is no move at all. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. Flow isn't just about movement. It's about knowing when stillness serves better. He sheathed his knife. "You're ready." "For what?" Lyra asked. "To build your army," he replied, "and to take back your clan." "Ma." The hidden camp sprawled across a sheltered ravine 3 days' journey from the Vermilion stronghold. Over the past month, Lyra and Marcus had gathered 24 exiles, hunters, warriors, and craftspeople who had questioned Sulva's leadership and paid the price. Some bore physical scars from the matriarch's punishment. All carried emotional ones. Lyra moved among them as they prepared for the evening meal, checking weapons, offering encouragement, listening to concerns. The transformation from rigid clan captain to guerrilla leader hadn't been easy, but Marcus's lessons in adaptability had served her well. Jack S'more's hunting party returned. A voice announced from behind her. Lyra turned to find Sareth, a former clan healer who had been exiled for treating a wounded bone reaper without Sulva's permission. The compassionate act had been deemed treason. "What news?" Lyra asked, falling into step beside the healer as they moved toward the camp's entrance. "They encountered a patrol near the eastern pass," Sareth reported grimly. "Clan guards, but wearing new insignia. Sulva's personal mark, rather than the Vermilion crest." Lyra's jaw tightened. Another sign of the matriarch's growing separation from clan traditions. "Casualties?" "None on our side. 2 guards wounded, 1 seriously. Jack S'more let them live to send a message." They reached the returning hunting party, who had brought down several desert hares and a juvenile sand lizard, enough meat to supplement their rations for 2 days. But it was the bundle one hunter carried over his shoulder that caught Lyra's attention. "We found him half dead in a sinkhole," Jack S'more explained, as they laid the unconscious form on a sleeping mat. "Recognized him as one of the council elders, Vextal. He's been tortured." Sareth knelt beside the elder, her experienced hands moving quickly to assess his injuries. "Dehydration, exposure, multiple contusions, and these," she pointed to precise burns along his arms and torso, "are from an interrogation device, Bone Reaper technology." Lyra studied the elder's weathered face. Vextal had been a voice of reason in the council for as long as she could remember, one of the few who had sometimes challenged Sulva's more extreme decisions. "Treat his wounds," she instructed Sareth. "When he wakes, I need to speak with him." As the healer worked, Lyra sought out Marcus, who was inspecting the cache of weapons they had accumulated through raids on supply convoys. Most were standard frontier armaments, pulse rifles, concussion grenades, vibroblades, but a few pieces were of Bone Reaper design, distinguishable by their organic-looking curves and unusual power sources. "Vextal is alive," she announced without preamble. Jax Moore found him abandoned in the eastern sector. Marcus set down the weapon he'd been examining, a rifle with an unusual targeting system. Alive means he either escaped or was released. Neither scenario is encouraging. "You think it's a trap?" "I think Sulva doesn't make mistakes like leaving witnesses," Marcus replied. "If Vextal is here, it's because she wanted him found, either to send a message or to track him back to us." Lyra considered this. "Then we relocate camp immediately after questioning him. If he knows anything about the northern excavation or Sulva's arrangement with the Bone Reapers, it's worth the risk." Marcus nodded, though concern lingered in his eyes. "Just be prepared for the possibility that the information comes with a price." By nightfall, Vextal had regained consciousness. Though weakened, the Elder insisted on speaking with Lyra immediately. They gathered in the command tent, a repurposed merchant canopy, reinforced against Iridia's frequent dust storms. Marcus stood guard at the entrance while Sareth monitored the Elder's condition. "Captain Tamar," Vextal rasped, his voice damaged from screaming or thirst or both. "The rumors of your exile were true. Then—" "Former captain," Lyra corrected gently. "Sulva stripped me of rank when I failed to execute a human mercenary." She gestured toward Marcus. "The same mercenary who now helps us resist her betrayal." The Elder's eyes, clouded with pain and age, shifted to Marcus briefly, before returning to Lyra. "Then there is hope after all. We feared you dead, like so many others who questioned the matriarch's new path." "What happened to you?" Lyra asked. "Why were you tortured?" Vextal's gnarled hands trembled as he accepted a water container from Sareth. After drinking deeply, he replied, "I discovered communications between Sulva and the Bone Reaper commander, a brute called Kresh. They formed an alliance based on mutual interest in the northern ruins." "We know about the weapon cache," Marcus interjected from his position by the tent flap. The Elder shook his head weakly. "Not a cache. A ship. A vessel of the old ones, buried when the great meteorite reshaped our world thousands of years ago. Its power source still functions, and its weapon systems remain intact." "A functioning Old One vessel," Lyra breathed, the implications staggering. Such technology would make its owner invincible on Iridia, and a significant power even beyond the frontier. "Sulva has promised the Bone Reapers access to the ship's defensive capabilities in exchange for eliminating rival clans," Vextal continued, "beginning with a full assault on what remains of the Vermilion leadership." "When?" Marcus asked sharply. 3 days from now, at the Hollow Grove ceremony." Lyra exchanged a glance with Marcus. The Hollow Grove was a natural amphitheater near the stronghold where clan ceremonies took place, including the seasonal ritual, where hunters presented their achievements and settled disputes through formal challenges. "The entire clan will be gathered," she realized aloud. "Exposed, unarmed except for ceremonial blades. It would be a massacre. And Sulva would blame the attack on exile terrorists," Vextal added. "Specifically, on you, Captain. She has already begun spreading rumors that you've allied with off-world mercenaries to overthrow clan leadership." "Which is technically true," Marcus pointed out with grim humor. "How did you escape?" Lyra asked the Elder, suspicion gnawing at her, despite her respect for the man. Vextal's eyes clouded with shame. "I didn't. They finished their interrogation and left me to die in the desert. A punishment designed to make an example of me while avoiding the political complications of a formal execution." Marcus and Lyra exchanged another look. The story was plausible, but Marcus's earlier warning echoed in her mind. If this was a trap, walking into it could destroy everything they had built. "What forces do the Bone Reapers have in position?" she asked. "Three strike teams, each with a dozen warriors," Vexatel replied without hesitation. "They've established a forward base in the Needle Rock Formation 2 kilometers from the Hollow Grove. Sulva has ordered all perimeter guards recalled to the stronghold, ostensibly to participate in the ceremony. In reality, she's clearing the path for the attack." The level of detail was reassuring. Either the Elder was telling the truth, or this was an extremely sophisticated deception. Lyra made her decision. "Sareth, see that Elder Vextal receives proper treatment and rest," she instructed. "Marcus, gather the team leaders. We need to plan a counterstrike immediately." As the tent emptied, leaving only Lyra and Marcus, she turned to him with determination, hardening her features. "If Sulva has betrayed the clan to the Bone Reapers, the time for guerrilla tactics is over. We need a direct intervention at the Hollow Grove. Walking into a potential ambush with our entire force," Marcus cautioned. "If Vextal is compromised, then we die," Lyra finished simply. "But if he's telling the truth and we do nothing, the Vermilion clan dies instead. I won't abandon my people to slaughter, even if some still follow Sulva out of fear or ignorance." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your clan, your call. But we do this smart. Contingency plans, escape routes, and a clear objective beyond just saving lives." "The objective is removing Sulva from leadership," Lyra stated firmly. "And I know exactly how to do it under clan law, through the right of challenge at the ceremony itself." "A public duel with the matriarch?" Marcus looked skeptical. "She'll never accept. She'll have her guards cut you down before you can complete the formal challenge." A slow, predatory smile spread across Lyra's face. "Not if I challenge her champion instead of her directly. Tradition dictates she must accept a properly issued challenge to her chosen warrior. And I know exactly who that will be." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "Vorek, your old rival." "The same," Lyra confirmed. "And thanks to your training, I now know exactly how to defeat him." The Hollow Grove earned its name from the unusual acoustics created by its concave stone walls, a natural amphitheater where sound carried with exceptional clarity. As Lyra and her small team of infiltrators approached its outer perimeter, the murmur of hundreds of gathered clan members reached them despite the considerable distance. "Sulva has doubled the guard rotation," observed Tasmin, a young hunter who had been among the first to join Lyra's resistance. His sharp eyes scanned the ridgeline where armored figures patrolled at regular intervals. 20 at least, all wearing the matriarch's personal insignia. Lyra nodded, making final adjustments to her disguise. She wore the plain robes of a desert trader, her distinctive features concealed beneath layers of dust-colored fabric. The star iron blade was hidden beneath the voluminous garment, accessible through a concealed slit. "Remember the plan," she instructed the 6 infiltrators gathered around her. "We enter separately, using the merchant passes Marcus obtained. Once inside, disperse and locate the emergency exits. When I make my challenge, secure those positions to ensure our people can escape if the Bone Reapers attack." "And if they don't attack?" asked Sareth, who had insisted on accompanying them as medical support. "Then we've been granted a reprieve, not a victory," Lyra replied. "Sulva's betrayal remains, whether it happens today or tomorrow." She glanced toward the eastern ridge, where Marcus and the main force of their resistance fighters had taken position, close enough to intervene if necessary, far enough to remain undetected unless they chose otherwise. He had argued against her personal participation in the infiltration, suggesting she coordinate from a distance. But some battles needed to be fought face to face. 1 hour until the ceremony reaches the challenge phase, Tasmin noted, checking the position of Iridia's twin sons. "We should move now to clear the security checkpoint while the crowd is still arriving." With final nods of acknowledgement, the infiltrators separated, taking different approaches to the Hollow Grove's main entrance. Lyra chose a path that led her past families and clan members arriving for the ceremony. Children running ahead excitedly, elders walking with dignified purpose, hunters displaying ceremonial trophies that would be presented to the matriarch. None recognized her beneath the traitor's disguise, though several nodded respectfully as she passed. The familiar sights and sounds of clan life stirred complex emotions within her: pride in her heritage, anger at Sulva's betrayal, determination to protect these people who remained unaware of the danger they faced. At the security checkpoint, Lyra presented the forged merchant credentials Marcus had provided. The guard, a young woman Lyra recognized as a recent initiate to Sulva's personal cadre, barely glanced at the documentation before waving her through. The lax security was concerning. Either Sulva was overconfident, or the guard force was stretched thin, covering multiple positions. Inside the Hollow Grove, stone benches arranged in concentric semicircles faced a raised platform carved from the living rock of the canyon wall. Upon this stage, a throne-like chair awaited the matriarch, flanked by smaller seats for the remaining council elders. A circle, etched into the stone, marked the traditional challenge space, where for generations, hunters had settled disputes through ritual combat. Lyra found a position near the back of the gathering, close to one of the narrow passages that served as emergency exits during the rare but devastating flash floods that sometimes swept through the canyon system. From this vantage point, she could observe the entire ceremony while maintaining a clear path to both the stage and the exit. As the final attendees settled into place, a hush fell over the assembly. From a fissure behind the stage emerged Sulva, resplendent in formal attire that combined traditional clan symbolism with new elements, most notably a medallion that glinted with the unmistakable blue-green sheen of Bone Reaper technology. The matriarch took her place upon the throne, her weathered face betraying no emotion as she surveyed her clan. Behind her came the council elders, now reduced to just 4 elderly figures who moved with the cautious deference of those who understood their precarious position. And then, stepping from the shadows to take position at Sulva's right hand, came Vorik. The champion's massive frame was enhanced by ceremonial armor that incorporated technological elements clearly salvaged from the northern ruins. His clan blade, traditionally identical to Lyra's own, had been modified, its hilt now housing some form of power source that caused the star iron to pulse with unnatural light. Lyra's hand moved instinctively to her own weapon, hidden beneath her robes. The desecration of a clan blade was unprecedented, a violation of traditions stretching back 16 generations. It confirmed everything Vexatal had told them about Sulva's new allegiances. The ceremony began with traditional invocations, appeals to ancestors, and the spirits of Iridia itself. Sulva performed these with practiced precision, though Lyra detected subtle alterations to the wording, references to necessary change and evolving traditions that had never been part of the ritual before. As hunters came forward to present their achievements, trophies from particularly challenging hunts, artifacts recovered from dangerous regions, Lyra scanned the perimeter of the Hollow Grove. Her infiltration team had successfully reached their assigned positions, each now monitoring a different exit. There was no sign yet of Bone Reaper forces, but the ceremony was still young. When the presentation phase concluded, Sulva rose from her throne. The gathered clan members fell silent, anticipating the traditional opening of the challenge circle, a formality that had rarely led to actual combat in recent cycles. Hunters of the Vermilion clan, the matriarch's voice carried clearly through the natural acoustics of the Hollow Grove. We stand at the threshold of transformation. For generations, we have survived on Iridia through strength and tradition. But mere survival is no longer enough. She gestured expansively, the strange medallion at her throat pulsing in time with her words. The ruins of the North have revealed secrets, technologies that will elevate our clan above all others on this world. No longer will we scrabble for resources in the dust. No longer will we fear the desert or rival clans. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, some of confusion, others of approval. Lyra noted with concern how many nodded along with Sulva's words. The promise of power was seductive, especially to those who had known only hardship. To embrace this future, Sulva continued, we must set aside certain limitations, traditions that no longer serve our purpose. The Council of Elders has been reduced to those who understand progress. Dissenters have been removed. At this, the murmurs grew louder, more troubled. Even those who craved advancement recognized the ominous implications of removing council members who disagreed. Today marks our final ceremony under the old ways, the matriarch announced. Henceforth, challenges will no longer be permitted. Leadership will pass by my designation alone to those who demonstrate proper loyalty and vision. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembly. The right of challenge was fundamental to clan governance, a safety valve that prevented tyranny by ensuring leaders could always be held accountable by those with the courage to face them in honorable combat. It was the moment Lyra had been waiting for. Rising from her seat, she cast aside the traitor's robes, revealing her hunter's attire beneath. A collective gasp swept through the crowd as recognition dawned. "I challenge!" Lyra's voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. "By the ancient right that predates your throne, Sulva, I challenge your champion to trial by combat." All eyes turned toward her as she strode purposefully down the central aisle toward the challenge circle. Whispers followed in her wake. Captain Tamar returned from exile, the disgraced hunter. Sulva's face contorted with rage, then smoothed into a calculated mask. "The exile has no standing to issue challenge," she declared. "Guards, remove this interruption." Several of the matriarch's personal guard moved to intercept Lyra, but she had already reached the edge of the challenge circle. Drawing her star iron blade, she held it overhead in the formal posture of invocation. "I speak not as captain or exile," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the hollow grove. "I speak as blood of the Vermilion line, bearer of a blade forged 16 generations past. By the laws, even you cannot erase. Sulva, my challenge must be answered." The crowd's reaction was immediate and vocal. Tradition demanded the challenge be honored. Many rose to their feet, voices joining in support of the ancient rite. Sulva's guards hesitated, unwilling to violate such a fundamental taboo before the entire clan. Seeing her advantage slipping, Sulva changed tactics. A cold smile spread across her weathered features as she turned to Vorik. "My champion will answer your challenge. Exile," she announced. "And when he separates your head from your shoulders, let it serve as example to any who would cling to outdated ways." Vorik stepped forward, his modified blade humming with unnatural energy as he entered the challenge circle. He towered over Lyra, his bulky frame enhanced by the technological armor he wore. "I've waited for this opportunity," he growled, only loud enough for Lyra to hear. "The matriarch promised me your position if you ever returned. Now I'll take your life instead." Lyra settled into a ready stance, not the rigid form taught by clan tradition, but a fluid posture that Marcus had shown her, balanced and adaptable. "You'll try," she replied calmly. Sulva raised her hand, then dropped it sharply. "Begin!" Vorik attacked immediately, his blade cleaving the air with a sound like tearing fabric, an effect of whatever modification had been made to the weapon. The strike followed the first form of traditional Vermilion blade work, but amplified to devastating effect by the technology integrated into his sword. Instead of meeting the attack with the corresponding counterform as her training would have dictated, Lyra flowed aside, like water around stone. Vorik's enhanced blade cut empty air, the momentum carrying him slightly off balance. Taking advantage of his overcommitment, Lyra struck, not at his weapon arm as tradition would demand, but at his leading leg. Her blade sliced through the armor at the knee joint, drawing first blood and eliciting a roar of pain and surprise from the champion. "Dishonorable!" he snarled. "The forms dictate—" "The forms are just a beginning," Lyra replied, already moving to her next position. "Not the whole of combat." Enraged, Vorek abandoned pretense of formal technique. He charged forward, his modified blade leaving trails of energy in the air as he swung wildly. The attacks were powerful, but predictable, exactly the rigid, form-based offense that Marcus had taught Lyra to counter. She met each strike with minimal deflection, rather than full parries, conserving energy while letting Vorek exhaust himself. When he overextended on a particularly vicious diagonal cut, she ducked beneath his guard and scored a second wound, this one across his unprotected ribs. Blood stained the challenge circle as they continued their deadly dance. The assembled clan watched in stunned silence as their former captain systematically dismantled the matriarch's champion using techniques they had never seen before. Fluid, adaptive, and devastatingly effective. Vorek's technological advantages proved increasingly irrelevant against an opponent who refused to meet force with force. His enhanced blade could cut through stone, but only if it connected. His armored exoskeleton provided protection, but slowed him against Lyra's lightning transitions. As the duel reached its 7th minute, far longer than most challenge matches lasted, Vorek was bleeding from a dozen minor wounds. His breathing labored, his movements growing desperate. Lyra, by contrast, remained composed, her blade extensions of her will rather than a separate tool. In a final, reckless assault, Vorek activated some hidden function in his modified weapon. The blade erupted with crackling energy, leaving scorch marks on the stone as he swung it in a horizontal arc meant to bisect Lyra at the waist. Instead of leaping back as expected, she dropped flat beneath the swing, her own blade thrust upward to catch Vorek's weapon arm at the wrist. Star iron met flesh and bone with surgical precision. The champion's hand, still clutching his modified blade, fell to the stone floor with a sickening thud. Vorek collapsed to his knees, clutching the cauterized stump of his wrist, his face a mask of shock and pain. Lyra rose smoothly to her feet, her blade now pressed against his throat in an echo of her confrontation with Marcus months earlier. "Yield!" she commanded. Blood drained from Vorek's face as the reality of his defeat sank in. "I yield," he managed through clenched teeth. The traditional response would have been immediate execution. Challenges to the death were seldom survived by the loser. The crowd waited expectantly for Lyra to deliver the killing stroke. Instead, she lowered her blade and stepped back. "I accept your yield," she announced, loud enough for all to hear, "and grant you life in exchange for truth." A murmur of confusion swept through the assembly. Sulva rose from her throne, face contorted with fury. "Finish him," she commanded. "The challenge demands blood." "The challenge demands justice," Lyra countered, turning to face the matriarch directly. "And justice requires truth. Tell them, Vorek, tell the clan what awaits them under Sulva's new tradition." The defeated champion looked from Lyra to Sulva, calculation replacing pain in his eyes as he weighed his options. Self-preservation won out. "The Bone Reapers," he gasped. "They wait beyond the ridge. Once the ceremony concludes, they will enter the Hollow Grove and execute anyone loyal to the old ways." He gestured toward Sulva with his remaining hand. "The matriarch has promised them access to the ship beneath the northern ruins in exchange for eliminating rival clans. The Vermilion will survive only as servants to their technology." Shock and outrage exploded through the assembly. Clan members rose to their feet, voices raised in anger and disbelief. Sulva's personal guards looked to their leader in confusion, their loyalty suddenly conflicted by the revelation of her betrayal. "Lies!" Sulva shrieked, But the medallion at her throat betrayed her, pulsing with the same blue-green energy that had powered Vorik's modified blade. The exile brings foreigners to corrupt our ways. She consorts with humans and mercenaries. I bring truth, Lyra countered, stepping out of the challenge circle to address the clan directly. Yes, I have learned from an off-worlder, learned that our strength lies not in rigid adherence to form, but in our ability to adapt. Not in blind loyalty to a leader, but in commitment to each other. She pointed her blade toward Sylva. The matriarch has executed council elders for questioning her alliance with our ancient enemies. She has modified clan blades with foreign technology. She has abandoned everything that makes us vermilion in pursuit of personal power. The evidence was damning, visible in the very modifications Sylva and Vorik displayed. But before the clan could respond, a new sound cut through the tumult. The distinctive whine of Bone Reaper hover vehicles approaching from beyond the ridge. "They come early!" Tasmin shouted from his position near one of the exits. "The Bone Reapers advance!" Sylva's expression shifted from rage to triumph. "Yes," she cried. "Let the weak be culled. Let those who cling to the past perish with it." Panic threatened to overwhelm the assembly as the first Bone Reaper warriors appeared at the Hollow Grove's upper entrance, hulking figures in organic-looking armor, wielding weapons that pulsed with the same energy as Sylva's medallion. "To the exits!" Lyra commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Hunters, form defensive positions. Elders and children first through the escape tunnels." To her surprise and gratification, the clan responded instantly to her leadership. Hunters, including many of Sylva's personal guard who now recognized her betrayal, moved to intercept the Bone Reaper advance. Civilians began an orderly evacuation through the exits where Lyra's infiltration team had already taken position to guide them. As the first energy weapons fired into the crowd, Lyra raised her blade to signal Marcus and the resistance fighters waiting beyond the ridge. Within moments, the distinctive crack of pulse rifles answered the Bone Reaper attack. Precision fire, targeting the invaders from multiple angles. The battle for the Hollow Grove had begun. Lyra fought her way toward the nearest group of civilians, cutting down 2 Bone Reaper warriors who had broken through the hunters' defensive line. Their armor, while formidable, had vulnerable joints that yielded to star iron guided by flow rather than form. "This way," she directed a group of elders, toward the western exit where Sareth waited to guide them to safety. "Move quickly, but calmly." A familiar figure appeared at her side. Vorik, his severed hand roughly bandaged, wielding a conventional blade in his remaining fist. "The southern passage is blocked," he reported, surprising Lyra with his apparent shift in allegiance. "Bone Reaper heavy units moving to encircle the grove." She nodded acknowledgement, reassessing their tactical situation. "We need to split their forces. Take any hunters still loyal to you and create a diversion at the main entrance. I'll lead a strike team through the rock fissure behind the stage to flank their position." Without question or hesitation, Vorik moved to execute her orders, either from genuine respect born of defeat or simple survival instinct. Either way, Lyra had gained an unexpected ally. As the battle intensified, Lyra caught sight of Sylva, attempting to slip away through the fissure behind the throne, likely heading toward a rendezvous with the Bone Reaper commander. With a gesture to Tasmin to continue coordinating the evacuation, she pursued the matriarch into the narrow passage. The fissure wound upward through the canyon wall, eventually opening onto a plateau that overlooked the Hollow Grove from the west. There, bathed in the reddish light of Iridia's setting suns, Sylva stood in conversation with a towering figure whose armor resembled a skeletal exoskeleton more than conventional protection. "Commander Kresh," Sylva was saying as Lyra emerged from the passage. "The attack was to begin after my signal. You've ruined everything." The Bone Reaper commander's voice emerged from his helmet with a metallic rasp. "Plans change, Matriarch. My scouts detected the Exile's forces moving into position. The opportunity to eliminate all opposition at once was too valuable to waste on ceremony." He towered over Sulva, his armor incorporating both technology and biological components in a grotesque fusion that embodied the Bone Reaper philosophy. That flesh and machine should be melded for maximum efficiency. "The ship is nearly excavated," Sulva protested. "I have fulfilled my part of our arrangement. You promised me control of the canyon territories." "I promised you survival," Kresh corrected coldly, "which is more than the rest of your clan will have. The weapon systems from the ship are already being integrated into our warriors. Your usefulness is at its end, matriarch." Lyra stepped forward, her blade catching the dying light. "Is betrayal a surprise to you, Sulva? You've made quite a study of it yourself." Both figures turned sharply at her voice. Sulva's face contorted with hatred, while Kresh's reaction was hidden behind his expressionless helmet. "The exile," he observed. "Captain Tamar, your reputation is impressive, for a Vermilion." "Former captain," Lyra corrected, echoing her words to Vextal. "Current liberator." Sulva drew her own blade, still unmodified. Lyra noted with interest. Perhaps the matriarch didn't fully trust the technology she'd embraced. "You've ruined everything," she hissed. "Generations of planning, positioning our clan for ascendance." "You mean positioning yourself," Lyra countered, her stance relaxed but ready. The clan was merely a resource to be traded away. "Enough talk," Kresh interrupted. He raised a weapon that resembled a living limb, more than a manufactured tool. "The excavation continues regardless of this skirmish. Neither of you will leave this plateau alive." The weapon hummed as it charged, but before it could discharge, a pulse rifle shot struck Kresh's armored shoulder. The impact wasn't enough to penetrate his protection, but it disrupted his aim, sending the energy blast harmlessly into the sky. Marcus emerged from behind a rock formation, rifle raised for another shot. "3 against 1 seemed unsporting," he called out. "Though I'm not entirely sure which side the matriarch is on at this point." Sulva snarled and lunged toward Lyra, her blade moving in the familiar patterns of clan technique. Precise, powerful, predictable. Lyra flowed around the attacks, not yet counter-striking, observing her opponent's rhythm and weaknesses. Meanwhile, Kresh turned his attention to Marcus, firing rapid bursts that forced the mercenary to take cover behind the rocks. The Bone Reaper commander advanced methodically, his armor rendering conventional weapons largely ineffective. "You fight like him now!" Sulva spat as Lyra evaded another textbook combination. "Like an undisciplined off-worlder. No respect for tradition." "I fight to survive," Lyra replied, finally counterattacking with a strike that opened a shallow cut along Sulva's forearm. "And to protect what actually matters, our people, not our forms." The matriarch's attacks grew more frenzied, her technique deteriorating as rage overcame training. Lyra recognized the pattern, the same fatal flaw that had undone Vorik in the challenge circle. Rigid adherence to form became a weakness when emotions disrupted its precision. When Sulva overcommitted to a downward strike, Lyra executed a perfect flow transition, stepping inside the matriarch's guard and trapping her weapon arm. With a twist and strike, she disarmed the older woman, sending her blade clattering across the stone. Sulva stood defenseless, hatred burning in her eyes. "Finish it," she commanded. "Prove you're still Vermilion enough to honor the challenge." Lyra held her blade at the matriarch's throat, exactly as she had with Marcus months ago. "The challenge was with your champion, not you, and I already showed mercy once today." Before Sulva could respond, a pained cry drew their attention. Marcus had been driven from his cover by Kresh's relentless assault. A glancing hit from the Bone Reaper's weapon had scored his leg, leaving a smoking wound that hindered his movement. Kresh advanced on the injured mercenary, weapon raised for a killing blow. "Your interference ends here, human." In the heartbeat it took Lyra to assess the situation. Sulva made her move. The matriarch lunged toward her discarded blade, snatching it up with the speed that had once made her the clan's greatest hunter. Lyra faced a split-second choice: deal with Sulva or save Marcus from Kresh's attack. Without conscious thought, she made her decision based on flow rather than form. Her blade left her hand, spinning through the air to strike Kresh's weapon with perfect precision, just as it discharged. The energy blast went wide, and the momentary disruption gave Marcus the opportunity to roll aside and bring his rifle to bear on the Bone Reaper's knee joint, one of the few vulnerable points in his armor. The shot connected, bringing Kresh to the ground with a metallic howl of pain and rage. At the same moment, Sulva closed the distance to Lyra, her recovered blade thrusting toward the younger woman's unprotected back. Unarmed, Lyra reacted on pure instinct. She pivoted and dropped, using the momentum of Sulva's attack to guide the blade past her body. Continuing the circular movement, she grasped the matriarch's wrist and redirected her forward momentum. Sulva, unable to check her charge, went over the plateau's edge. Her scream echoed briefly before ending in a sickening impact on the rocks below. Lyra had no time to process what had happened. Kresh was struggling to rise despite his wounded leg, bringing his weapon to bear on Marcus once more. Without her blade, Lyra was at a severe disadvantage against the armored commander. Marcus, seeing her predicament, tossed his pulse rifle toward her. "The power cell!" he shouted. "Overload it!" Understanding immediately, Lyra caught the weapon and adjusted its settings while dodging an energy blast from Kresh. The rifle's power cell began to emit a high-pitched whine as she manipulated the controls to bypass the safety protocols. "Surrender, Commander," she called to Kresh. "Your forces in the Hollow Grove are already in retreat. This can end without further bloodshed." "The Bone Reapers do not surrender," Kresh snarled, firing another wild shot that scorched the stone near Lyra's feet. "The ship will be ours. This world will be ours." "Your choice," Lyra replied. With perfect timing, born of her new understanding of flow, she hurled the overloading rifle directly at the commander's chestplate. Kresh attempted to bat the weapon aside, but his injured leg slowed his reaction. The rifle struck him squarely, the destabilized power cell detonating on impact. The explosion wasn't large, but it was precisely targeted, cracking the commander's armor and sending him staggering backward toward the plateau's edge. For a moment, he teetered there, arms windmilling as he fought for balance. Then, with a final mechanical screech, he toppled into the same abyss that had claimed Sulva moments before. Silence fell across the plateau, broken only by the distant sounds of combat from the Hollow Grove below and the whine of retreating Bone Reaper vehicles. Lyra hurried to Marcus's side, examining his wounded leg. "Can you walk?" He grimaced but nodded. "Not quickly, but yes, your blade." "I'll retrieve it later," she said, helping him to stand. "Right now, we need to get back to our people." Supporting each other, they made their way back through the fissure passage to the Hollow Grove. The scene that greeted them was one of aftermath, rather than active combat. Wounded being tended, damage being assessed, small groups still returning from pursuit of the retreating Bone Reapers. Most importantly, the civilians had been safely evacuated, with only minor injuries reported among the elders and children. The hunters had formed an effective defense once organized, and Marcus's resistance fighters had provided the decisive advantage from their elevated positions. Vorik approached as Lyra helped Marcus to a makeshift medical station, where Sareth was treating the injured. The former champion's face was pale from blood loss, but he stood straight, his remaining hand resting on a conventional blade. "The matriarch?" he asked. "Dead," Lyra replied simply. "As is the Bone Reaper commander." Vorik nodded, processing this information. "The clan awaits direction. With Sulva gone and the council decimated, there is no clear line of succession." Lyra looked around at the gathered Vermilion clan members, hunters, artisans, elders, and children, all looking toward her with expressions ranging from respect to uncertainty. They had followed her leadership during the crisis, but tradition dictated a formal transfer of power. "Gather the remaining elders," she instructed Vorik, "and any hunters of captain rank or higher who survived. It's time to establish a new way forward, one that honors our heritage without being imprisoned by it." As Sareth finished treating Marcus's leg, he caught Lyra's arm. "You're not planning to claim the matriarch's throne, are you?" "No," she replied firmly. "That system allowed Sulva to corrupt our purpose. The clan needs leadership, but not a dictator, even a benevolent one." Within the hour, a council of 7 had assembled near the challenge circle. 3 surviving elders, 2 captains who had opposed Sulva's excesses, Vorik, as the former champion, and Lyra herself. By unspoken consensus, the clan gathered to hear their deliberations, forming a circle around the impromptu council. "The tradition of single leadership has failed us," Lyra began, addressing both the council and the assembled clan. "It allowed ambition to override wisdom, and secrecy to replace accountability." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, though some of the older members looked troubled by such a direct challenge to centuries of clan structure. "I propose a council of equals," she continued, "drawn from all aspects of clan life. Hunters, artisans, scholars, elders. Decisions made through consensus rather than decree. And, most importantly, complete transparency regarding the challenges we face." "And what of the northern ruins?" asked one of the elders. "The ship the Bone Reapers sought?" "We secure it immediately," Lyra replied. "Not to use its weapons, but to ensure they cannot be used against us or anyone else. The technology of the old ones brought Sulva and the Bone Reapers together in destructive alliance. We will not make the same mistake." The discussions continued well into the night, but the fundamental change had been accepted. By dawn, a new framework for clan governance had been established, one that balanced tradition with adaptation, strength with wisdom. As the first light of Iridia's twin suns touched the hollow grove, Marcus found Lyra standing alone near the challenge circle, her recovered blade catching the golden rays. "Preparing for a final duel?" he asked, approaching with a slight limp from his bandaged leg. She smiled, sheathing the weapon. "No more duels for a while. I think. We have rebuilding to do, both structures and trust. And after that?" He leaned against a stone pillar, studying her with those pale eyes that had once seemed so alien to her. "Will Captain Tamar remain with her clan? Or has the frontier called to her as well?" "Former captain," she corrected with a smile. "Current council member. And yes, I'll stay. This is my home, my heritage, but perhaps with a broader perspective than before." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. "The trading post at Crosswind Junction has sent word. A merchant cruiser arrives tomorrow, heading toward the core systems. I've booked passage." Though she had expected this moment, Lyra felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. "You're leaving, then?" "My contract with the Planetary Council is complete," he replied with a shrug. "They wanted information about the ship and the Bone Reaper activities. Both threats have been neutralized, thanks to you." "Thanks to us," she corrected. "I would have died in exile without your teaching." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Marcus straightened, wincing slightly as he put weight on his injured leg. "I should help with the evacuation preparations. The Bone Reapers will return in greater numbers once they realize their commander is dead. This stronghold is too exposed to defend effectively." Lyra nodded. "The Council has already identified 3 potential relocation sites deeper in the canyon system. Better natural defenses, multiple escape routes." "Good." He turned to go, then hesitated. "One last piece of advice. Teacher to student." "I'm listening." "The star iron blade is magnificent," he said, gesturing toward the weapon at her hip. "But remember that it's the wielder, not the weapon, that truly matters. Flow comes from within, not from any tool, no matter how perfect." Lyra smiled. I remember our first meeting. You're holding it wrong, you said. And now you're holding it right, he replied. Because you understand it's not about holding it all. It's about becoming. With a final nod, he limped away to assist with the evacuation efforts, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts and the rising suns. 3 days later, the Vermilion clan began its migration to a new stronghold, a network of caves and canyons that offered both protection and possibilities for expansion. The remaining Bone Reaper forces had withdrawn after a brief, unsuccessful attempt to locate the body of their commander, apparently deciding that whatever secrets lay beneath the northern ruins weren't worth the cost of a prolonged conflict. Lyra led one of the advance teams, scouting the path ahead and marking safe routes for the main caravan. As she crested a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of Iridia's desert frontier, she paused to watch a distant speck ascending through the atmosphere, a merchant cruiser departing for the stars. She touched the hilt of her star iron blade, feeling the familiar weight that now seemed like an extension of herself rather than a separate entity. Marcus was gone, but his teachings remained, not as rigid forms to be followed blindly, but as principles to be adapted and evolved. The blade had once represented her heritage, her place within the clan's rigid hierarchy. Now, it symbolized something more profound, the balance between tradition and progress, between honoring the past and embracing the future. As the merchant cruiser disappeared from view, Lyra turned back toward her clan, moving with the fluid grace that had become second nature. There were challenges ahead, rebuilding their society, establishing new relationships with neighboring clans, perhaps even reopening cautious communication with the planetary capital. But for the first time since her exile, Lyra felt completely centered, not because she had reclaimed her position or defeated her enemies, but because she had found a path that honored both where she came from and who she had become. The desert wind rose around her, carrying sand that shifted and flowed across the dunes, constantly changing, yet remaining essentially the same. Lyra smiled, recognizing the perfect metaphor for her people's future. Not rigid resistance to change, nor complete abandonment of tradition, but a flowing adaptation that preserved what mattered while embracing what must come. She moved forward, blade at her side, toward whatever challenges awaited beyond the next dune. After all, as Marcus had taught her, it wasn't the destination that mattered, but how one moved along the path.